Hi again then guys, and welcome to another Rivals match on Gran Turismo 6 in particular. And in this installment we're moving slightly away from the world of supercars or full-on race cars to a category of vehicle which many players don't use as much, to say the least. Some people are indifferent to, and some people, less and less, but still some, are directly opposed to, for understandable reasons, and that is hybrids or electric vehicles. As an overarching category, it's alternative fuels, basically, and these two are probably the most significant ones on Gran Turismo, the Tesla Model S and the FISKER Karma. So which one's better? Well, as we always do, we'll first of all break down either car on its own, and then we'll compare them head to head to find out which one is better, at least on paper. First up then we have the Tesla Model S. Now this is not, unfortunately, the top-of-the-line P85D or the P90 or even the P100. It's the signature performance, because back when this game was released, that was pretty much the best one you could get. It doesn't have all-wheel drive, the power is very good for an electric car, it's still one of the best around, but nowhere near the power of those newer dual-motor models. You're looking at 422 horsepower, 443 pound-feet of torque. Now that's not bad at all in fact. That's roughly the same as you'd expect from, say, a mid-sized super saloon, or at the very least, a sports saloon. So those are good numbers to be working with. Plus you have to factor in the fact that this is cheaper than the FISKER. It's a 92 grand car to the almost 140 of the FISKER Karma. Now this is, in real life, one of the best cars ever made, as far as I'm concerned. It has incredible levels of practicality. You've got trunk space in both the front and the back. It carries its weight nice and low, surfboard style, and the fact that it has 7 seats as a legitimate option gives it just an advantage over every other sedan on the market, put simply. But all of those practicality advantages, in a similar way to my dream car, the Ferrari FF, become kind of irrelevant on a racing game, because it's all about the fuel economy, the handling, and the speed. So from that regard, that's where the Tesla and the FISKER, or any of the electric cars in the game generally speaking, tend to suffer a little bit, because it's quite simply not as dominant. Both of these cars do around 135-ish miles per hour and similar kinds of speed in reverse, and the simple fact is, at 518 pp, which is where this Tesla sits fully tuned, it's quite simply not good enough for top-end speed. And that's the biggest thing that this car suffers from. The PP level is just too high. It can't compete at that level. Now if it was around 480, 490, that would be much more accurate, because although it is quick for acceleration and does have very good handling, the top-end speed is crippling on any track which cars like this are going to be running on. So with that being said, how does the FISKER Karma compare? Well, I would say that the Karma has a very different approach to essentially the same destination, an alternative fuel vehicle which is designed not just to appeal to greenies, but to be a legitimate alternative to executive sedans. And I love both of these cars. The FISKER Karma is a vehicle which I would love to own if I had the opportunity, because of how different it is and how stylish it is, whereas the Tesla has a much more traditionally clever approach. It's very technically proficient, very German, I would say, in that regard, whereas the FISKER is much more of an Italian kind of vehicle. It's more oddball, more classy, more stylish, a bit like a Maserati, that kind of thing. Now, as I said, I love them both, but they certainly have very different approaches to each other. The Tesla is a pure EV, it's not a hybrid at all, whereas the FISKER is very much so a hybrid, and one of the weirdest hybrids on the market, because not only does it have the battery pack and the motor which the Tesla has, not the same one, but the same layout, but it also has a petrol engine, a 2-litre General Motors engine up front, under that massive bonnet, and all that engine does is recharge the batteries for the motor, which is kind of a strange layout. Now it does give you roughly or over 300 miles of range, so it kind of gets the job done, but the main downside is just how heavy it makes the car. A Tesla isn't exactly a lightweight vehicle, but it's got an easy 300 to 400 kilo advantage over the FISKER Karma. Plus, the Tesla is cheaper, more powerful, and has a better horsepower per ton output. But the funny thing is, it's not that much quicker around the track. As you can see from the lap times, it's less than a second between them. So I would say that's actually more impressive on the part of the FISKER Karma than it is on the part of the Tesla, as much as I love the Tesla. So with that being said, both cars are certainly interesting in the way that they compare on their own. But how do they compare directly? Well, let's find out. First of all then, as always, we have the price tag, and as I mentioned earlier on, the Tesla has the clear advantage there. It's over 40 grand cheaper than the FISKER, and that is significant. Any amount cheaper when you're talking six-figure numbers is definitely a significant difference. As far as engine capacity goes, well, of course, neither of them really apply. Technically, the FISKER has a 2-litre, but not really because it doesn't drive the wheels, so we'll give both of them an arbitrary point because neither of them are really relevant in that regard. Or you could give neither a point. It's up to you. As far as PP level, this is where it gets interesting, because the Tesla is higher when you fully tune them both. However, what the Tesla doesn't have in its arsenal is a flat floor, and the FISKER does. Now, without the flat floor, the Tesla is higher by 10 pp at 518 to 508. But with the flat floor on the FISKER, it makes a huge difference, jumping it up to 534. Now, you could say that it's not fair to compare it when one car has it and one car doesn't. But that's not the way I do these. If the car has it as an option, then I'm going to include it in the list. And the simple fact that the FISKER has that option gives it a potential advantage, in a similar way to the advantage the Maserati Gran Turismo had in that Rivals episode. As far as power though, it goes straight back to the Tesla with 422 to the not far behind 398 on the FISKER. Then though, we get to the really interesting part, because this is where it swings not just in favour of the FISKER, but way in favour of the FISKER, because for torque, it's not even close. The Tesla is great, but the FISKER is a monster. 959 pound-feet of torque is insanely high. 443 certainly isn't bad on the Tesla, not at all. That's very high for an electric car, but that's nothing compared to the FISKER, so of course it gets the point there. As far as weight though, well, we already said the FISKER is ridiculously heavy, so of course the Tesla gets the point. Neither of them are exactly featherweights, certainly not the FISKER, but still, the Tesla is the lighter of the two. And as far as horsepower per ton, well, it's lighter and more powerful, so by definition, the Tesla is going to get that point there, although not necessarily by as much of an advantage as you might expect. There's only around 60 horsepower per ton between them, which is interesting given how much heavier the FISKER is. And of course, we don't base points on lap time because there are just way too many variables involved, but it is interesting to note that, as I said, there's less than a second between the two cars, at least of course on this circuit, and interestingly, that was without the use of a flat floor. I did not fit the flat floor on the FISKER, and it was less than a second slower. Now, if I had fitted the flat floor, it could have turned out differently, but I didn't run it that way, because in the end, we don't give it a point either way. And that means overall that, very interestingly, this is one of the very few occasions where the car with more points is also the quicker of the two. It's funny how often that is opposite, but on this occasion, the FISKER gets a respectable 3 points, but winning by a clear 2-point advantage is the Tesla with 5 points to its name. The Tesla has the price advantage, the power advantage, the weight advantage, and the horsepower per ton, whereas the Karma has an advantage in PP level thanks to the flat floor, and a huge advantage on torque. So overall, both vehicles are interesting alternatives to some degree to other sedans in the game, but I personally view them more as just an opportunity to drive a car which I like. So of course they're not going to appeal to everyone, because you do to some degree need to like these cars to enjoy them, but if you do like electric cars, well, chances are you probably already own them, but I would recommend giving them a chance, because they're not bad. They're just not as good as they could be with better tuning options. But overall, that's it for this particular Rivals matchup. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.